Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and today I have a real pleasure speaking with the incredible Kisha Wynter. And today is all about talking about owning your value and stepping confidently into negotiations. And Kisha has over 2 decades of experience in HR with Fortune 500 companies like Citibank and GE. And in this episode, Kisha opens up about her own journey. For example, there was a time she realized she could have asked 20% more, and her boss simply said, done. Sometimes it's that simple. And she'll teach you how to break free from limiting beliefs around money, build a successful brag bank to justify your ask, and why timing is everything when it comes to salary discussions. One of the key insights that she shared that I really liked: you are not asking for a charity case. You're asking for what you have earned. And I really think that for any of you that maybe feel uncomfortable with asking for money or talking about money, stop leaving money on the table and start negotiating with confidence. Let's dive right in. Hi, Kisha. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Limor. How are you doing?
Very well. I'm so excited to having you today here. And let's dive right in. I know you worked in HR for many years.
Yes.
And perhaps can you share a little bit about your early career? And I remember you said something like you had an eye-opening experience with your boss. So can you share about that?
Yes. Interestingly enough, we're talking about negotiations of salary. And when I took my first role, early in my career, was my first, a very junior role in compensation and benefits, ironically, in human resources. I did my interview, and at the end of the interview, the hiring manager said to me, "Okay, what's your salary what salary do you require?" And I said, "Well, I saw it was posted online. What was the salary offering?" And he gave me the offer. And I was, it was like, I would say maybe a 5%, 5 to 10% increase. And I was ecstatic. I'm like, awesome. I'm getting extra money to do a role that I really want to do. So fantastic. And he said, "That's it?" And I was like, "What else do you want?" He was just like, "You're not going to counter offer or anything like that." And I was like, "Can I?" He was, I didn't even know that there was such a thing. I thought whatever the salary offer is, you accept it and you moved on. So I was confused when he said, "Is that it?" And I said, I didn't know that you can salary negotiate, right? Like, I thought the offer is the offer. And he says, "Let me educate you." He was a non-minority male. So in the US, that's a white male. And he says to me, like, frankly, if I was talking to another male, especially another white male, they would have counter offered. And one of the reasons women are not paid as much, and most of the women on his team, most of the people on his team were women to begin with. He said one of the reasons you are underpaid, if taking bias out of the equation, is because there is no negotiation happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this again, and I'm going to make an offer, and then you're going to come back to me with a counter offer. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, if he wants me to, ask for this big salary, I'm going to go big, right? Go big or go home. So I negotiated, I think it was an extra, maybe 20%. I added on to it, and he said, "Done."
Wow.
Done. My mind was blown, and I thought to myself, and he was an amazing leader. That was just the beginning of a lot of coaching that I would have gotten throughout, the couple of years that I worked for him. And so I said, "What an amazing guy. He's so nice. He gave me this big 20% increase." Well, of course, I took the job, right? And, dove into compensation and looked at the ranges. And the reality is that I was significantly underpaid in my prior role. And so because of that, he could literally afford to give me that 20% increase. And within 8 months, I was promoted and I got another like 25% increase. So the reality is that I was, for a couple of years in my career, I was still early, but I started out low and I was being paid. So by the time I was being promoted, there was such a big gap. Thank God that he was, actually had the integrity to not necessarily say that to me, but push me and challenge me to negotiate what my worth was.
For
So that was
sure.
such a good learning experience.
Wonderful. Yes. And by the way, not on myself specifically, but I've seen cases where not just women, but people that don't ask for much. There are some employers that are taking advantage of it. And I had a problem as a manager, like managing people that were underpaid because they were hired at a very low salary because they asked for, very little. And the employer was taking advantage of that. And then what happened was that eventually, when they wanted to kind of get what they should, it was really difficult to match that because it was like, I don't know, double-digit percentage in increase.
That's exactly true. And so when you come in low to actually, bridge that gap and give you a 20, 30, 40% increase, it feels big. But the reality is that that is the right thing to do. And employers, now we have laws that are, at least in the US, that are in place around salary transparency and ensuring that you're very clear around what the ranges are. So, hopefully that is decreasing. But the reality is employers should be taking a proactive approach and assessing that people are being paid equitably for their performance and the type of roles that they do. So it really shouldn't be on the back of the employees. But until everybody gets integrity and every employee is proactive, we've got to learn to take it into our own hands as well.
For sure. And my strategy as an employer was if someone was asking for less than what they should, I was trying to get them what I thought they should get. Because I knew that eventually if they will not be happy, they will, I will be in trouble.
Yeah. And it's a very important retention strategy. An organization, frankly, that want to attract top talent that are going to bring the value to the organization, right? There's some roles that are revenue generating roles and some roles that are not necessarily directly linked to revenue, but your role could be improving process and productivity, which is a benefit to the organization that will bring cost savings and ultimately impact profitability. And so, employers have got to think about how successful they want their company to be and be willing to pay a premium price for top talent. That's just a fact. Otherwise, you hire mediocre people and you get mediocre results.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And even if you find top talent and maybe they are less aware of their worth, pay them by their worth.
Right.
Otherwise, they will leave you. And probably better than I am, how costly it is to have retention.
Yeah, they say it's a minimum of an additional 40%. So 140% of your salary is it needs to be replaced. That's the cost associated with replacing somebody for their role, 140% of their salary minimum. I've heard numbers as much as twice their salary.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about women and about money. I mean, women don't feel comfortable with the whole money thing.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, we're not necessarily socialized to talk about money, depending on how you were raised in your home. It is not a normal conversation in your household to talk about money. I know when I was growing up, it wasn't necessarily a conversation that we always had. I mean, my mom, she was very good at budgeting, and I saw her with her envelopes, putting money aside. So I saw good practices, but in terms of a conversation around it, never had a conversation growing up. And so it becomes abnormal when you finally get into the workplace and you become an adult. It is a foreign concept. Like you're not taught financial acumen and financial basis when you're growing up. You don't have conversations around money. Even if there are financial difficulties in your home, you just say, oh, we can't afford that. But there's no actual discussion around it. And so when you get into the workplace, it becomes really uncomfortable to have the conversation because it's not something that you have ever done before. And then on top of it, because we're not used to it, a lot of employers are not used to women having the conversation. And so whenever you do, there's sometimes a backlash that when you do bring up the topic and you do start negotiating your salary, it seems so foreign to the employer that they are taken aback, and there's an attitude of, well, you should be grateful that we're employing you. You should be grateful that you're getting a fair pay. What do you mean? Especially that person. And it's interesting because the studies show that it's actually both men and women as leaders there will be a backlash against the woman. And part of it is that, and what I mean is, even if the woman who is negotiating reports to a woman, there still is a backlash from that woman. And that is because when she was, well, I never negotiated salary. Like, how dare you? Like, that's not something I did when I was coming up. And so it is both genders that you'll see the backlash for a woman negotiating, because none of us are used to, at least in prior generations. You're probably getting a lot more common now, I would expect, with Gen Z. But millennials, Gen X, boomers is not something that we were raised to negotiate salaries.
Yeah, we were raised that, at least I was raised that money is corrupting. Money is a bad thing, right? I mean, you just need to survive. And I mean, I was kind of grown in a middle class family, so it wasn't scarce, but it wasn't like we didn't have abundance. And it was like, okay, thinking about money in general, oh, it's evil. It's a bad thing. Well,
Yes.
actually, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And we need to feel comfortable with it.
Well, this is what I say. And you're right. There's a lot of, we won't even get too deep into money stories and money trauma and how we were raised and our experience with money. It affects so much of our psyche, and it actually impacts how effective we could be at negotiation, right? So from a religious or a spiritual concept, I grew up in church, and you heard it ever, money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Right. And so actually it says the love of money, right? Money itself, I understand, is an energetic exchange. So it's about what you do with the money. It's not that money is inherently evil. It can be used for good or it can be used for bad. So I believe that when money is in the hands of good people, you're utilizing it for good. Okay, yes, you're providing for your family, you're making sure your bills are paid, you're creating life experiences, like going on vacation and doing those things. But also you're engaging in philanthropic things, right? You're giving to charities where people are in need. You're contributing to social justice, right? You are giving to environmental preservation efforts, right? So it is not so much that the money is itself evil, it's what you do with it. And, I would believe that we're all good people listening to this podcast. And so when money comes in the hands of people like us, we use it for good things. We give back, and we contribute, and we literally pay it forward.
For sure. And I want to talk about, going back to the topic of negotiation. You mentioned about when you come to negotiate, first you need to do a research. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this because, as I said, I went into that discussion that I just told you with this really great manager that challenged me to think about it. Really, if looking back, I should have done some research before going in, and I actually didn't expect to be asked what I wanted my pay to be. So I didn't go in. There are different things that you could do when you go into before you get into a salary discussion, is you start to have conversations, you begin to do your research. So there are, first of all, websites that you can go to, such as salary.com, payscale.com, and many different, a plethora of other websites that you can go to research what is the salary range for your job title, for your level, for your position, even for the country and the city that you live in. It will give you customized information so that you could. So that's one approach. But it shouldn't stop there, right? You should also be talking to recruiters, right? If you're applying to a role, you may be working with a recruiter, or if you're in an organization, there are HR, human resources people. Now, I will say, I was the HR person that if you came to me and you asked me the range for a role, I would give you the range for the role. And so a lot of people would never ask because they never thought HR would do it. And if every HR person does not do it, but you never know, right? They say, ask and you shall receive, right? If you don't ask, you're not going to receive. So I say, have a conversation with your colleagues, have a conversation with your mentors. The mentors are a really good place, especially the mentor works in a similar field, in a similar industry. They can tell you what the range is that they've seen for the people that work for them as well. So many other places. The thing is, when you don't have a conversation around it, the ignorance remains. And then the other place that you can go to is even professional associations. So like I was in HR, SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, is a place you could go and get salary ranges. You can actually, some states and cities actually publish salary ranges for their municipalities. And so there's a plethora of information that's out there as well. And then there's a lot of, rules now around salary transparency where they have to actually post the salary ranges. But do your homework, do as much research, talk to people, look online, get to multiple places and sources of data because information is out there.
For sure. And I think those laws about transparency are very good. I know that they are not in all states, but I do see a lot of roles in LinkedIn that they publish a range. And yes, sometimes the range can be quite wide, but at least they give you some perspective about, okay, how can I get on this role? And I think, like you mentioned, like asking people, not feeling embarrassed and ashamed to ask about it's. You don't need to ask someone how much are you making, but you can ask, hey, for this level of experience that I have, for this role, where I live, what would make sense for me to ask for it? It's a different kind of question, right? Because I think people feel uncomfortable asking someone, how much are you making?
Right. I mean, and the how you phrase it is everything, right? Some people, right, I will tell you, I had a peer, I found out, over, I think at this point, it was like more than 15 years ago. And I remember he said to me, well, this is what I didn't even ask him. Well, this is what I got hired for. And I was like, you're making $10,000 more than I am right now. And you have less experience, right? We're working the same exact job title, but for some reason, perhaps he negotiated better than I did, and he was being paid $10,000 more. And so I went in, and that equipped me and armed me with data made me feel comfortable. Because the reality is also, they say women are not comfortable asking for what they're worth. Well, studies show that when we're provided data, it arms us with confidence. And even if I didn't see the study, I knew. I would never have gone into my boss and said, look, these are my contributions. I want to get a salary increase just on my own. But when he volunteered that information to me, then I was armed with data. Did I go in and say, well, so-and-so, this guy's getting paid? No. I came in with the information, which we'll get into, to justify the salary increase. And I asked for what I was doing. And a few months later, I did get the salary increase, right? And so having that conversation just gives you, even as a business owner now, I'll go to other business owners and say, what do you charge for these services?
Yeah.
And if they're charging significantly more, I'm trying to understand why they're charging significantly more. Are they providing? And if it's very similar, it gives me the confidence to know that there are multiple people. So it's just a confidence booster as well, when you know you're not asking for something that's ridiculous.
For sure. Yeah. And I know that sometimes it's hard because you're not exactly sure and you don't want to ask too much. But typically with women, we ask too little. So I would say it would be safe to assume bump it a little bit.
I would say if you think you're asking for too much, right, that means you're gun shy and you're probably asking for too little.
Yeah.
The people that are asking too much are not thinking that they're asking too much.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned about contribution, so I want to kind of pivot into that. So it's not just about asking for specific amount of money, but actually feeling confident and showcasing why you deserve to
Yes.
be paid that well, and what impact are you able to, either if you're in the company like you already made, or if you're a prospect, what do you think you can contribute? So let's talk about that. And I know you have this notion of a brag bag.
Bragg
A
Bank.
bank, sorry,
Yeah.
brag bank.
Yeah. Yeah. The Bragg Bank is really you're going in and you're collecting information, first of all. A fun thing I used to do is whenever leaders would send me an email saying, thank you for your contribution to this project. This is how it impacted my team. I would take that email and I would save it. A lot of it was qualitative information, right? So I'm collecting that this information is okay. This impacted the team. This gave a strong sense of engagement and morale. Being somebody that worked in HR, this improved productivity, cost savings, all these different things. And I literally over the year, because you know what? We don't remember all the amazing, great things that we do on a daily basis because we're out there grinding and executing. And so what I love to do is I tell people to get a file on your computer and take all the accomplishments, all the emails, all the notes, all the thank yous that you get and save them. That's the brag bag. And so when you're ready to have that discussion now, you have all the data in addition to your performance review, the feedback that you've gotten directly from your manager, your goals and objectives that you've been tracking and you exceed your targets. Those are all quantifiable things that you probably already have and you're tracking, but the additional brag bag is more the qualitative stuff that is also important. And it gives you an additional data point when you're talking to the manager around that. So one, it makes you feel confident. It helps you to remember. Two, it helps you to remember all of your contributions. And then three, it justifies. It helps you to begin to justify. No, I'm not asking you to give me a charitable contribution. Just give me more money just because I'm delivering results. Here is the impact of my results. And because of that, I'm justified to negotiate more in my salary.
For sure. And I think this notion of a brand bank is brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing it. And I would like to add that sometimes managers are not very good in providing good feedback, both good and constructive. They're not very good at it.
Yeah.
I just had a client yesterday talking about it, like she doesn't get any good feedback from her manager. And I had similar challenges. Like a manager would say, "Great job, Limor." And I was like, okay, what does it actually mean? So
Yes.
I want to mention to our audience, if someone tells you it was great, it was good, and it's not very clear, don't shy away from asking, can you elaborate more? What was so great
Yes.
about it? Can you be more
Yes.
specific so you can add those things to your brag bank, but also understand kind of what are the things that your manager or peers appreciate?
I love that because a lot of organizations actually don't train there. So one of the things I do is leadership development training and consulting. And so this is right up my alley as well because a lot of organizations do not equip their managers with leadership or coaching or even feedback skills. And so part of it, and studies show, according to McKinsey, that women in particular don't receive, especially development feedback as much, which when you have that blind spot, you don't know where to improve and it negatively impacts your ability to advance in your career. So what I tell my clients is I give them a framework. I say SOI, situation, observation, and impact. And what does that mean? So if a manager says to you, oh, you did so great in this meeting, right? Okay. So the situation was that you presented at a meeting, you already know that. What were the observable behaviors? That's observation that the manager realized that caused him or her to say that you did a good job. So, what specifically what behaviors did you see? That's a question to ask. And hopefully the manager will come back with something like, Well, you had direct eye contact, you paused, you had a two-way conversation with the audience, and the impact is that everybody was engaged. They thought they were being brought along, and you were able to get buy-in into the ask and the presentation that you have. And so your ability to influence and get buy-in into the proposal that we have was impactful. And that's what we walked away. So that's a framework. Ask them what are the observable behaviors and then what the impact of it was. Not just you did a great job. And on the flip side, you didn't do such a good job. Okay, what behaviors did I need to change and what was the impact of me not displaying those behaviors?
Absolutely. And I think it reminds me of SBI framework that also is known for feedback, similar to SOI, I think, situation, behavior, and impact. And there are other
There you
many
go.
frameworks. So definitely, I mean, this is a wonderful tool to kind of reframe the conversations. What are the things that you need to know? This is wonderful.
I love it. I love it. Very similar indeed.
Yeah. And I wanted to also talk about the timing. Let's say, okay, you do the brag bank, right? And you work within a company and you want eventually to get a raise or maybe a promotion. What is the right timing to start talking about it?
So, first of all, you should be having development discussions on a regular basis with your manager. And frankly, at least quarterly having some sort of discussion around your ability to get to the next level. So you know that with a promotion, there is always salary, well, not always, but often a salary increase. So you want to make sure, first of all, that you're having regular monthly and quarterly performance discussions, and then you tie in the salary into that. What I say is at least 3 months before your annual performance review, you're having a discussion around, look, here are the contributions that I have. You present the brag bank, you present the data, and I want to understand what it's going to take for me to get a salary increase coming up, significant salary increase in the next annual performance review. So you give them enough time. One of the reasons I say that is around this time, HR and finance, they're beginning to consolidate their budget for your salary increase. And if you wait too long, a lot of times that budget is already allocated to something else or even to someone else. And you want to give them enough time so that the manager can say, okay, I'm going to need extra budget, and they can plan for it so that they can get the increase. Now, it's not saying that you can't do it after the fact, but you want to make it remove as much friction as possible from you being able to get that increase. And so I would say about 3 months before your annual performance review, you want to start having that discussion.
Absolutely. And I think that in general, I mean, when I was leading people, I was having those development planning done about 6 months ahead of time. So not just about salary, but about promotions, having those conversations ahead of time. And I would say if your manager doesn't initiate those conversations, you can initiate those yourself. Like you can say, hey, I want to talk about my performance and to get from your feedback and understand what's the path forward for me.
I tell people all the time, you've got to own your career and own those discussions, because the reality is that human nature stays away from giving feedback because a lot of times it just feels difficult. So it activates the fight or flight response. And so if you wait until your leaders are going to initiate that conversation, majority of the time they won't. And so you've got to own that and you've got to drive those discussions.
For sure.
So I totally agree with that.
For sure.
Totally agree.
And what else haven't we talked about? I'm trying to think. Yeah.
I would say that the reality is that you're not, I think I said this before, you're not asking for a charity case when you're having these discussions. And so you want to make sure not only are you prepared, but you're going into the discussion with a positive mindset. I say this all the time. Always start on a positive note and maintain positivity throughout the process, because the truth is the conversation can feel hard to folks regardless of their gender, regardless of their background, because a lot of us are not, skilled at having these discussions. And so you want to go in and you want to make the brain receptive, the brain of your boss or your leader receptive to the discussion. And you start out, right? Like, I would assume if you're in the role and you're ready to ask for an increase, you're performing well, first of all. Maybe we should start it there first, right? Like, you don't start a salary negotiation discussion if you're not performing well, right? That's the fact. And so if you've gotten a low performance review or have gotten like a lot of negative feedback or developmental feedback that would be considered career derailers, it is not the time to have the discussion, right? But if you're having the discussion, I would assume you're contributing well, you're a strong performer, and you really enjoy the role. So you want to start the conversation off with something like, I really enjoy working in this organization, and I feel like I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm being stretched. And so as a result of that, I want to have a conversation with you about the possibilities of reviewing my compensation. You see how that is?
Yeah.
It's not like you owe me anything, or you start off with like, I really love this job. I'm excited. I'm engaged. I've noticed that my contributions and my responsibilities have expanded quite a bit. Here's my impact. So, help me understand what is the next step or the possibilities of me having my compensation reviewed so that I can get an increase. Boom.
Wonderful. Love it. Love it. Yeah. I think that positive attitude is always a winner. So always thinking about, it's actually going to be a positive discussion about my contributions and how that is going to even, increase my motivation and more contribution to the company.
Yeah. And that's it. You focus on that and just make it a positive discussion. I've had those discussions many times. The other thing I will say is, this is more when you're entering in an organization. Recognize, first of all, whether or not you're inside or outside an organization, we all have options, right? The company you're working, when we get into a scarcity mindset thinking, and people feel sometimes trapped in organizations because they've been there for 20 years or 5 years, they haven't interviewed, they forget, that they're actually, they have marketable skills that other companies will pay for. And somehow they become myopic and begin to think, oh my God, nobody else will employ me. I can't get a job anywhere else. And that's just not the truth. And sometimes I tell people, you know what, like, even if you're not looking, a confidence booster is just to interview for roles and get offers. I did that in my career. I never actually, as I said, my old company, I stayed there for 20 years. But every so often I would go on interviews and it would boost my confidence. Like, you know what, somebody else values my skills and they're willing to pay me, and a lot of times even pay me more. And so that gets you out of being so siloed and so focused on your company that you begin to think that nobody else will hire you, and you get into this scarcity mindset. And so I say this, whenever you're going into a new company and you recognize that there are resistance in the salary negotiation process and it's really difficult, I say this all the time, that's a red flag. Because if it's so hard that they don't want to pay you, what you're worth before getting in, trust me and believe me, you're going to be fighting for every single penny when you get in. It is a big red flag. And I would say, you look at other opportunities or multiple opportunities before you put yourself in a box, because a lot of times you fight for compensation in one organization and another organization, as long as you're a strong performer, they're going to be able to pay you more than your current salary. They're going to be able to pay you. So don't think that the company that you're working on is your only option, because we all have options.
Absolutely. I meant that. Absolutely. And Kisha, and before we part ways, how can people find you?
I love it. So I'm everywhere by my name, Kisha Wynter. So if you go, I'm primarily on LinkedIn. So if you connect with me and message me on LinkedIn, that's the primary way. Also, you can go to my website, yourpowerunleashed.org. And I have a book that's coming out.
Incredible.
So it's going to be available for ordering in August of this year. And so on Amazon, you can go to my website, yourpowerunleashed.org, or you can go to Amazon and order the book. The name of the book is Your Power Unleashed: How Savvy Women Use Courage to Get Promoted, paid and find fulfillment.
This is incredible. And by the time this episode is going to be out, probably your book is already going to be on sale. So I'll make sure that I put all the links to your website, LinkedIn, and to the book on Amazon so people can get it. I mean, this is wonderful. This is exactly what we need. We need books like that.
Yes. So use our courage to get paid more and to just be happy and fulfilled. Like I say to people, we spend the majority of our waking hours working. So if we're not happy and fulfilled and satisfied in our job, it means we're spending the majority of our lives we are awake unhappy. And so let's not wait for the weekends to be happy or after work hours. Let's find roles that are fulfilling and satisfying and that are going to be willing to also pay us for our contribution.
Absolutely. This is a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much, Kisha. It's been a pleasure having you here today.
It's been so great, Limor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Kisha. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm super excited to share with you what's coming up next week. Next week, I have a pleasure speaking with a colleague of mine. We're both coaches. Her name is Josie Haynes, and she's an incredible engineering leader. She's a former VP of engineering at Tile, and she's not less incredible executive coach. And we both share a great passion coaching women. And I was so excited that she had the time and speak with me for this podcast. We are talking about promotions, and you're going to learn all about promotions. We'll dive deep into that. How to know you're ready for a promotion. What do you need to avoid? What are the steps you need to take to make sure that you get your well-deserved promotion? Trust me, you don't want to miss that episode. I'm super excited for this conversation with Josie, and see you next week. And before you go, as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to get notified of any future episodes. Share with me what you liked, share with me what you want to hear, and what guests you want me to bring. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.